And this is the claim that possibilities seem to be inherently value-laden. Okay? So all possibilities for Whitehead are possibilities that are not vacuous, they're not devoid of any meaning. A possibility is a possibility of something. And that something Whitehead names is essentially value. It's worth. It's just worth that this process of developmental worth of becoming towards value that firing occasions or human lives are concerned with. Okay. So this value for Whitehead is not just invented or imposed. Okay? And this is very controversial in today's philosophical landscape. Okay. Rather, he says there are antecedent standards of value that are really there in the universe, whether one recognizes them or not. He's wanting to say, to use a common term, that value, there's an objective place for value in the universe, which means that doesn't mean we know precisely what it is, right? We navigate that. We sort of hinted at that at the question before the conversation here. But there's an objective sense of value. There's antecedent standards of value that are really there in the universe. Okay, so the way he thinks about value then involves the notions of intrinsic worth, right? Something that is valuable, that is worthwhile in and of itself. Okay, synonyms he uses as well are importance. Right? The notion of importance is fundamental in human life, he says. And also the distinctions between better and worse. He says these are ultimate notions as they occur naturally in daily life. He would challenge us, just try to live without them. Okay. In some sense we can, right? And we recognize tragedy, we recognize nihilism as this ability for human beings to live without this sense of their own intrinsic worth, their own importance. Whitehead says the universe harbors the place for these values. It's really there. Okay, so again, yeah, not vacuous possibilities, but infinite possibilities of value. They're woven into the structure of the universe, and they're actualized in its evolutionary development. Now, again, you may not agree or you may have some questions, but this is what Whitehead is getting at with the unfolding process of the universe. Okay, what are some examples of value? I mean, okay, we're going to use a few common terms that, again, are controversial, but Whitehead is going to hold their place in some deep sense. Okay, there's values of truth, for example. Okay, rational values, we might say. All right, there's values of goodness. We might call them ethical or moral values, right? This is what I think, Jill, you were haunting at, or not haunting, it haunts us. You're hinting at in a certain deep way. Okay, there's also values of beauty, right? There's aesthetic values. Think of the statement Whitehead made about music, this beauty, this composition of glorious music. Or how about in art, the confluence of color, of harmony. And so let's say something just about this in one sense, is that for Whitehead, what is true about the nature of the universe is discovered to be true. Okay. And it's really an important sense that there's a value in this discovery of truth, right? He even makes the claim that science itself cannot even get started, right? Without judgments of value, there'd be no science. Because the fundamental value of science is that truth is worth, keyword, knowing in and of itself precisely because it's true. Okay? Now we can complicate this a lot, but I want to at least get that out there. Okay? And now, similarly, we don't purely invent standards of goodness for Whitehead. Right? We recognize them as exemplified, say, in honorable lives. This doesn't mean we recognize them as perfectly exemplified, but that admiration is usually directed towards an achievement of goodness that we see lacking in our own lives or in our own societies. So Jesus, to give a few examples, the Buddha, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, are all exemplifications of what we call a goodness or compassion in some sense. Even a justice, a call for justice that the Whitehead says is really, that really belongs. Well, it's not used there anymore, right? It really belongs in the nature of things, this sense of value and of realized value in human life. At the very beginning, one of you mentioned, I apologize for forgetting the name, mentioned this distinction between ought and is, right? David Hume makes this claim. It's how do we get from what ought to be the case from what is to be the case? And there's a large philosophical literature like unfolding this problem. But Whitehead says, we feel an example, we feel this ought, if you want, examples of this ought in our lives, and we feel it contrasted against what is. And that sense of contrast between odd and is the sense of, well, missed possibility. It's also the haunting of goodness in a deep way. Right? So there's a deep existential nature to our navigation of these different values, right? So truth, goodness, these are terms that include a lot. I'm just using them for sort of simplicity's sake. So what about standards of beauty? Or do we purely invent standards of beauty? Okay, what about the idea, the concept of harmony or symmetry? Okay, do we invent that? Or do we recognize and discover these things as instantiated in the world as beautiful, right? Say we recognize some art and some contrast of color or some harmony of music as beautiful. Think of a sunset, think of a person, think of a flower. Whitehead has this beautiful statement, I should have put it in here, about an isolated glade in some primeval forest. That's how he puts it, where there's one budding flower. No creature has ever seen its beauty, and yet he states, but this beauty is a grand fact in the universe. It's a really beautiful statement on the poetic side of Whitehead's thought. So beauty is there to be discovered, to be recognized, and of course you don't want to say that it can't be created. Certainly it can. What is art after all, right? Our art seems to be about the discernment of value, the discernment of beauty, and we disagree about the extent of those things. Okay, but that there's a distinction between greater and lesser value in beauty. I mean, it seems to be fundamental to human experience. And Whitehead's pointing to these sort of stubborn notions. So all these values then are related. Okay, they're related to possibilities in the nature of things. Okay, think of possibilities of truth to be realized. Okay, truth again is a complicated statement, a complicated word. Possibilities of goodness, okay, to be actualized. Possibilities of beauty to come to life in the world. So these are all possibilities of value that are brought into being in the process of evolution.